So, priorities tell us what comes before anything else in our life. Literally, the word prior is the root of the word. But how do you know what your priorities are? I mean, let's be honest, we're pretty good about saying what we think our priorities should be, but what we think and what we do are not always the same thing. Like if I said my health is important, but I eat junk food and I never exercise because it's hard, then it's pretty clear that my health isn't really my priority. Being comfortable is. And if I say that my friends are important, but I ignore what they like to do and try to get my own way, then my friends aren't really a priority. Getting what I want is. So do our actions line up with our priorities? Because what we do says more about our priorities than just our words. So after the Transfiguration, Jesus begins to travel south towards Jerusalem. And while he's on his way, he has all these people questioning him. And one of these people that questions Jesus is this rich young guy. So in Matthew 19, this guy runs up to Jesus and asks him, "Teacher, what good thing do I got to do to get eternal life?" And Jesus gives him a pretty straightforward answer. He tells him, "Keep the commandments." But the young guy fires back, "Which ones?" Which is kind of a weird question because his first question implies he knows he needs to do good, but his second question shows that he thinks that there might be a shortcut. Like, he's got to do good, but he doesn't have to do that much good. He just has to keep the really important rules and then he can just skip the rest of that stuff. So Jesus gives him a short list, like with 5 of the 10 commandments and 1 law from Leviticus. Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't lie, honor your parents, love your neighbor as yourself. And notice, all those are about how you treat people. But the guy brushes off Jesus' answer with, "Yeah, I've done all that since I was a kid. What do I lack?" And it really seems like this guy is trying to get some kind of unique answer. Like, if he does one special thing, then he's going to be just fine. And what's important here is that this guy senses that he's lacking something. So Jesus tells him, if you want to be perfect, sell everything and give it to the poor. And once you've done that, come and follow me. Because what he lacks is what he had. This young guy, he doesn't get what he was looking for. And after he hears this, he leaves and he's just full of sorrow because he was so rich. And Jesus turns to his followers and he tells them that it's really difficult for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. It's kind of like a camel having to go through the eye of a needle, except it's easier for the camel. And that really worried Jesus' followers. But he says that for people it's impossible, but that anything's possible with God. And that's when Peter jumps in, and he seems pretty pumped about all this because he really has left everything behind. He wants to know what he and the rest of Jesus' followers are going to have. And so Jesus responds with this description of the new creation, where the Messiah is ruling and the apostles are judges, and everyone who made personal sacrifices by leaving their home or their family for the sake of Jesus would get 100 times as much in return. And Jesus reminds his followers of something that he has said before and something that he will say again, that the first will be last and the last will be first. I'll be honest, this is a tough one for me. Jesus tells this rich young guy to sell everything that he has and give it to the poor, and once he's done that, to come follow him. And so, I read this and I'm wondering, is there a problem with being rich? And there's certainly an argument that could be made, but I think it would miss the larger issue. The issue this rich young guy is facing is about more than money. It's about priorities. When the guy asks Jesus about what good thing that he needs to do to get eternal life, Jesus points him towards God's law. Basically, if you want to do good, listen to the one who is good. Listen to God. But when the guy pushes back and asks about which commands he has to keep, Jesus has this guy focus on his treatment of others, which is super interesting. If you love God, then you have to love people. But I think the guy misses it. He's so caught up with the bare legal requirement that he misses that those commands are all about love. So Jesus tells him to sell everything that he has and give it to the poor. But he doesn't do this to add an additional command because this guy has already done everything that he's supposed to do. Jesus isn't offering extra credit here. He's telling him to sell everything to show this guy that he really doesn't love his neighbor. And he really doesn't love God. he loves money, and he loves himself. And I think that's why this guy goes away sad. His love of money got between himself and his love for God. And you can see how it got between him and God by the way it affected his relationship with people. He prioritized personal wealth over the well-being of other people. Here's the thing. Selling his stuff could have been anything. The fact that Jesus tells him to do this is because Jesus recognized that's what was keeping this guy from following Jesus. And that's our key. Come, follow God's Son. But God has to be our overwhelming priority. If we prioritize anything beyond or even alongside God, it gets in the way of us and God. We have to make these things, whether it's our jobs, our education, our relationships, whatever, work for God. And that takes sacrifice. But Jesus' sacrifice is the core of our faith and our identity as Christians. If we're unwilling to make sacrifices for Christ, then we're not worthy of his sacrifice for us. So by refusing to sacrifice, we might feel like we're keeping something of value, but really we're losing something that's so much more valuable. But God, he's not, like trying to rob us of our blessings. That's Jesus' whole point about the new creation. Whatever we give up, God is going to overwhelmingly multiply our blessings in return. We can't outgive God. So, when we make sacrifices, we feel like we're losing something, like we're becoming last. But because God's grace and his blessings, the more we give up, the more he blesses in return. So we're not losing, we're gaining. We're becoming first. And so the first will be last, and the last will be first. So after God, what are your priorities? Maybe it's education, family, friends, your sports team, something else. Tell us about your priorities and how you can make them work for God in the comment section below. Thanks. See you next week.